Black Book, tab 6. Date stamp 155, paragraph 7. Got it?
Got it.
Can you show us any written request from City Center to change this Phase 1 project to residential use as required by this paragraph?
You're asking for a written request from City Center to the bank?
Can you show us any written request from City Center to change this Phase 1 project to residential use as required by this paragraph?
No, not in any of this paperwork. I can't show you that piece of paper.
Can you show us written approval from Fifth Third to City Center allowing construction to change from commercial to residential?
No, again, that doesn't exist in any of this paperwork.
Black Book, tab 6, page 159. Paragraph 32.
32.
Does this paragraph require you as Fifth Third representative to notify Mr. Plank prior to any foreclosure action?
Paragraph 32, relation to the loan. Do we have to give Mr. Plank notice of foreclosure? No, the paragraph actually reads, the lender may, at lender's option, declare all sums secured by this instrument to be immediately due and payable without prior notice to the borrower. And lender may invoke any remedies permitted by paragraph 25 hereof. So, no, according to this, we don't have to give Mr. Plank any notice.
Refer to paragraph 33. Same page, same.
Okay.
Do you know if legal counsel is present at any time as Mr. Plank attested to by his signature?
Do I know if Mr. Plank had legal counsel review these documents? I do not know for sure. The documents were sent to Mr. Plank before the closing. They're typically received by the borrower, reviewed by themselves and their attorneys. If they've got questions, comments, or concerns, they come back to the bank and the bank's counsel and make changes to the loan documents. I know Mr. Plank or no one from City Center ever responded to those loan documents, the initial documents that were sent to him. There were no request changes made to the loan documents. So I would assume that was done. I think I saw someplace in all this paperwork Mr. Plank said he did not review the documents with any attorney. He signed that he did, but I think he testified that he did not have the documents reviewed by anyone. Does that answer that question?
Yes. When Joanna Plank made an agreement with City Center and Cold Stone to delay rent, did this violate the construction loan agreement for signatory to the construction contract?
I honestly don't recall what agreement Mrs. Plank had with Cold Stone to delay the rents. I don't know. If there was a contract between City Center and Cold Stone for Cold Stone to pay specified rents at specified times, I, as the bank, would rely on those rents coming in to support this project. If the rents don't come in, it doesn't drive the value of the project. So if the rents stopped, if that lease was changed in any way, shape, or form, that could affect the value of the project. So yes, that would be a concern to the bank.
The loan document required the leases as a condition of closing prior to the loan. Why did this loan ever close in the first place?
Hindsight. The loan, very early on in the process, right when the loan was getting ready to close, may have been right after the loan closed. I'm not confident. It's right before, right after the loan closed. We discovered that City Center had put 3 foundations in the ground out there at the project. We're either right before closing or right after closing. It's still a project we like. We want to be involved in it. We want to be a part of it. I think that actually happened before we closed the loan. So we made approvals internally to say, all right, we were originally going to do the dirt work, and we wouldn't start construction on a building until they had pre-leases and equity into the building before it went up. We changed that and allowed them to put those 3 foundations in the ground. So we paid for, out of loan proceeds, 3 foundations right from the get-go and didn't make City Center put in $210,000 for each one of those building sites right before the loan closed. So we made that decision that we'd allow them to be in there. The logic we were given at the time was it was October, November, we were approaching the winter. To do that type of construction work, earthwork and concrete work in the ground in the winter is very difficult. If you've ever tried to stick a shovel in the ground in January, the ground is concrete. You can't. It tears up machinery. It adds a lot of time and a lot of cost. It made sense to us at the time. It's October, the ground's soft. Dig the holes, put the foundations in the ground, and stop. And continue with the earthwork. We'll continue with the loan agreement as planned and build the buildings in the future.
See Blackbook, tab 6, page stamp 157, paragraph 24.
Blackbook, tab 6,
Page 157, paragraph 24.
24, okay.
Did City Center give rents to Fifth Third as required by this paragraph?
It's a big paragraph.
Maybe paragraph 24.
Yes. guessing it's just the first paragraph for 24 or not?
The question is, did City Center give rent to Fifth Third as required by this paragraph?
No. To the best of my knowledge, City Center never gave rents to the bank. If rents were collected, they were collected through City Center, held by City Center, dispersed by City Center. They weren't given to the bank.
Now, to go to the bottom of the page, the question is, if City Center did not give rent to Fifth Third, did City Center pay interest on these rents to Fifth Third as required by this document?
No. To the best of my knowledge, the bank never received rents from City Center, and I am fairly confident the bank never received any interest on those rents.
All right. Joanne S. from Fifth Third stated the loan was forwarded to Special Assets Department. How long did that department have it before turning it over to legal? Also, what steps were taken by Special Assets to get this loan up to date or settled?
Well, I know there was a letter or an email from Joanne to City Center telling them when the loan was transferred. Fall 2007. I don't remember the exact date of when. I'm not sure where to look and find that. Sometime between July and November, I'm guessing, 2007. The Special Assets Group would have done the same, continued the same steps that Joanne and Brian had done. We were missing information, we had questions, there were issues that had arisen that we couldn't figure out what was going on. They had started additional buildings that they weren't supposed to have started. We couldn't track that their equity was going into the project. They had continued down that path of trying to gather all that information to get this back in compliance with the loan documents so we could proceed ahead with it.
Were there any missing documents from the beginning when the loan shouldn't have been closed? Should not, let me read it. Were there any missing documents from the beginning where the loan should not have closed?
There were missing documents from the inception of the loan. No, for the initial closing, I don't think we were missing anything. We would have been when we found out that the three foundations were in the ground. That was not part of the original agreement, original intent. But we made the decision internally to stay with the project and let those foundations go in. So, based on the original terms we approved internally, with three foundations in the ground, we would have needed leases for those three buildings. We decided not to collect leases for those three buildings, to assume it was still dirt, let the foundations go in, let them sit there. If one of those buildings continued to go up, then we'd require those leases. But at the time we closed, I think we had all the information we were looking for.
Can you explain what documents were required for the borrower before closing?
Before closing, there would have been a lot of documents. There would have been financial documents, personal financial statements and tax returns on the guarantor. There would have been all the incorporation paperwork for the borrower, for the city center, everything, how they're registered with the state, what their tax ID number is, all that incorporation paperwork to make sure they were legal the city center could enter into a contract. There would be construction-related documentation, the plans and specs we've all seen all week. There would be budgets for the construction of the buildings, for the development of the site. We look for subcontracts, contracts with the subcontractors they had. A lot of times they wouldn't have them day one. They wouldn't have, slightly, they may have in this case, but I don't think they did. They wouldn't have a roofing contract when they were doing earthwork for the site that's further down the road. At that point in time, they probably talked to those subcontractors, but I wouldn't know that they have contracts in place for those particular subs.
Let me ask a part of the question. Were all these documents provided? If not, why did it close?
The documents we needed to close the initial loan, being the initial phases we were funding, was the dirt and the site work. Yeah, I believe we had all that paperwork, all that documentation. It was when they started building the buildings and coming out of the ground is when it triggered. We needed more information from them, and we could never get that.
Why did Fifth Third close on this loan without leases and additional funds? Did Fifth Third just say no and walk away from this loan?
At the very beginning, no, I don't think the bank could have. We issued a binding commitment letter, so we were bound to the terms of that commitment letter and the loan documents. I guess I take that back. When we found out the 3 foundations were in the ground, that was contrary to what our initial approval was. That would have voided the commitment letter, and we could have ceased it right there and never proceeded with the funding and walked away. We didn't want to do that. We've gone through a lot of work and effort. Still thought it was going to be a successful project. Still wanted to be involved in it. We made the decision to allow the foundations to be in the ground and proceed forward.
What is Special Assets responsibilities of Fifth Third?
The Special Assets Group is it's a department set up that handles any commercial loan, not residential loan, but on the commercial side, that's developed any type of issues. It's strayed from the plan, the original approval, what everybody, being we call the line of business where Brian, Joanne, and Dan worked for the credit department. Everything those people approved on the front end and thought was going to happen with the project, if it's just not living up to that, if it's strayed, we're having issues, we're having problems, we can't deliver what we approved. We can't walk into an examiner or an auditor and explain to them that, yeah, we approved X, and we're doing X. We've approved X, and we're off course. We can't get back to X. That's when the Special Assets Group gets involved, and they try to further the actions of what was going on with Joanne and Brian and bring the loans back into compliance.
Okay. What steps to help City Center stabilize loans once the loan was turned over to Special Assets?
The Special Assets Division, and they've continued with the efforts that Brian had started and Joanne had continued. Now started, I think they've actually started the first building, the second building. They put a foundation in for another building on the site besides those original ones. They started ordering product for those other buildings. Those Flexiport floors, those second floors, those were purchased for buildings in addition to the 2 we were talking about. It just kept going on, and they were trying to get their arms around that and trying to wring that stuff in. The initial request for information that we had, it went months before we ever got answers to that stuff. We finally, when Special Assets took it over, ran with it for a while, they made the decision that the borrower wouldn't work with us. We could not get this back in compliance, and that's when they took the legal action.
If the city center loan was turned over to special assets, could the project been saved with Fifth Third Bank?
If the loan had been turned over to special assets earlier, I'm guessing? No?
If the city center loan was turned over to special assets, could the project been saved with Fifth Third? I think once they turned it over, it could have been saved.
Yes, that's what I understand.
Okay.
Once you understand,
That's.
Once the project was turned over to the special assets group, it was not a death sentence of it's done, it's over, it's going to be foreclosed on. Not the case at all. It's very, very expensive, very time-consuming for a loan to travel down that path. That was special assets' number one job, was to fix this and turn it back over to Joanne and Dan at that time. To get it fixed, get it back in compliance, and hand it back to Joanne and Dan.
okay, how did they, the next part of the question is how?
How could they have done that? A lot of what Joanne and Dan continued from what Brian had done, I don't know what they could have done any different. They met with Mr. Plank, they met with City Center, they continued to ask the same questions, they need the same information. You keep building buildings, I need the leases to prove we can build those buildings. You keep building different new buildings, I need to show that you get the equity in so we can keep funding our loan to prove we can finish this project. Based on the information or lack of information they had given us, we couldn't prove that. We couldn't make those decisions. The decisions we could make were, we were in trouble, we don't have enough money to finish these buildings. This is going to end. We're going to have half-built buildings with no tenants and no money to finish the project. We only saw the situation getting worse because we couldn't get information out of City Center.
Okay, why does the default letter reasons only state non-payment or reason for default, even though there was other non-compliance issues with City Center?
Good question. The default letter could have had any one of the possible or all of the possible defaults that we talked about. The ultimate default that was sent, demand was made on the loan was not repaid. That was the ultimate default. We called the loan due, it was mature, it was all full, it was all due and payable right now. It was not repaid. That was the default they put in there. It was the one all-encompassing. We told you it's over, you got to pay us. You didn't pay us. There's your default. Could it have had? I lost track of all the defaults. Could it have had all those on there? It could have.
Why would default letter say borrower failed to timely remit payments on this note if interest payments were not late?
Right. There weren't. The way the loan was set up, it had its own separate interest reserve, and every month when the interest bill came due, it would fund itself. The interest would be paid from itself and continue to keep the loan current. It would never show as past due. The default letter wasn't in reference to them missing interest payments, although at that point in time it could have been. We weren't on track. We didn't have leases. We weren't on track. The decision at some point in time would be made not to fund anymore. If we stopped funding on the loan, we would have stopped funding on the interest reserve as well. So interest payments would have been due from City Center. But the default letter, I don't think, is referencing interest payments. The default letter is referencing we accelerated the loan. The whole loan is due and payable now. You didn't pay us. That was the timely payment. We demanded payment. You didn't pay us. It's a default.
All right. Any follow-ups?
Mr. Kelleher, don't go into the book, but Exhibit 62 is the letter that Mrs. Steiger sent to Plank in saying that it's being turned over as special assets, and it's dated September 6, 2006.
2006. Oh, I'm sorry. I was a year too far.
And then the letter sent out by the attorneys for default was in November 2006.
2006. I was thinking that fall time period. Sorry, I think the wrong year in there. I had no further questions.
In the white binder, could you turn to tab 8, please, page 98?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The white binder, City Center binder, could you turn to tab 8,
8.
page 298?
Your Honor, may I be excused? I have the funeral service.
Right. How long would it be?
I'll do 1 minute.
Was that okay?
I'll talk fast.
All right. On September 7th, did Ms. Steiger ask, or did Joe ask Ms. Steiger, who should I contact?
Tab 8,
Page
from
298.
Joe Keogh to Joanne on August 14th, 2006.
Yes, sir. 298.
It's up on the screen if you want to
Here,
refer to
here,
it.
look on the screen. Then Joe Keogh asked Joanne, would you please spell me the name and phone number of the new contact for City Center?
Yes.
And go to the next page. On September 14th, then he asked Ms. Steiger to respond to the email requesting a contact person.
September 13th, yes.
And going to the next page, did Ms. Steiger respond, I don't know who the contact person is.
I did, the 13th email said, I did not respond to your request. The answer is the same. I do not know at this time who the contact person is. I will find out.
But City Center kept working, didn't they? They got the lease with Raymond James, finished for building 2.
At some point in time, yes,
You believe-
Raymond James was in there.
And they got Jive Betty in there up on the second floor too.
I believe so, yes.
And they got keepsakes into the second floor of building 2 as well.
I think all 3 of those were tenants on the second floor. I don't know when they came in as tenants on the second floor, but you're right, all 3 were tenants on the second floor.
So the 1 building they were able to finish construction, they got leased and productive, didn't they?
They got, I don't know how many, it was 3 tenants. I think there were 3 small tenants. I don't know they fully occupied that second floor of that building. I don't know what your question is.
Well, you had the entire first floor was rented.
Correct.
You got 5 tenants upstairs, 2 residential apartments that were completed and occupied, and now 3 more businesses up there.
You have 3 businesses on the second floor, and you have retail tenants on the second floor that, again, the bank did not agree with.
But that building was productive.
I don't know what that means.
It was paying for itself, wasn't it? It was able to, with all those rents? Or do you not know?
I don't know.
That's something that special assets should know, isn't it?
Something based on the rent roll, depending on what cash was received from the tenants, what the expenses were, you could figure out if that building made enough money to support itself and pay its corresponding debt. That I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
All right, no further questions.
No, all right. We're going to adjourn for the day.